Okay, we're going to visit an amazing British campsite from the South African War, Anglo-Boer War. So this campsite was started by the Scottish Rifles middle of July 1900. So that was after the fall of Johannesburg up to the north and the fall of Pretoria. And this was a strategic point along the railway line, and it was close to the Vaal River. So a lot of the British supplies came up this way, and the Boers by this stage had resorted to guerrilla warfare, and so it was a very dangerous place for the British to be. So they took this pretty high mountain, I actually call it Mount Orion, and that's what it looks like from the road. It's kind of near the Vaal River in the southern Transvaal, so it's quite a formidable position. And the British decided that they would set themselves up on the top of this hill or kopje or Mount Orion, and they would then be able to send out parties of soldiers, cavalry, to chase after the Boers should they attack the railway line, which they did fairly often. So the background to this is that about 33 years ago, I was called upon by the hiking board to do a survey, a historical survey of the kopje, because there was obviously some remnants from a British camp. And the locals wanted to make a hiking trail and start a business, and would I go and survey for the hiking trail? Well, I drove down there with my young family, and I was hooked. After being up on the kopje for a couple of hours, I realized that this was going to take me a long time. And so in those days, the only way we could map the site was to use compass and a tape measure. And this is what we proceeded to do. And over weekends for the next 5 years, we measured something like 40 kilometers of fortifications, tent sites, artillery sites. It really was quite an amazing experience. So this was our first site getting onto the site. There was a huge township here, which the people had been moved to much better accommodation, and it kind of looked like a ghost town like this when we first went up the kopje this way. So we had some quite nice scenery, like this ruined church, and that kind of set the atmosphere. And everything you might see from the pictures is full of bullet holes, because this is where the local commandos or security forces used to train for house-to-house fighting, which at that time was kind of a horrible reality in this country. So this is what the terrain looks like, and I'm still in touch with the local people. They became great friends over the years, and we did a lot of exploring together. On the right is Jasmine Coetzee, and on the far left is Ferdy Coetzee, who passed on a couple of years ago, and I'm sure he knows a lot of the secrets of the place that I'm still guessing at, because this just wasn't about a campsite and fortifications. It ended up about quite a mysterious prehistoric archaeological site, and there are still a lot of answers which have to come to me. I still have a lot of work to do there. So this is my stepson, these are two of my sons, and this is my wife, Bronnie Slager. So this is what it looks like from the air. So you will see it's a lot easier on Google to do the mapping. So you'll see a lot of positions that I've mapped, the main campsite, where the artillery was, where the Royal Engineers were. So there was a lovely heliograph station, which was a kind of a mirror signaling system, and a telegraph station right up there. It was also mixed up with Iron Age. You can see I've recorded an Iron Age kraal there. And all along the northern slopes here are incredibly big and well-built Iron Age villages, probably from about around the year 1600, but very, very intensive. Then we started finding other interesting features, and those are the purple ones here that I'm going to get to. So it's rather easy to measure like this. As you can see here, there's a beautiful campsite, and you can see the circular tent sites. These are actually rocks built in circles to keep the tent flaps down, and there are quite a number of tents here. And so there's actually 28 tents. So that means 8 per tent, which means 224 men, which means 2 companies in a regiment. So when the Scottish Rifles set this up, there was 2 companies there. It developed into bigger later on because it was used as quite an important base later on in the war for the British, when they assembled thousands and thousands of troops in the area, and then they swept along the blockhouse lines and trapped any Boer guerrillas against the blockhouse lines and sent them to prisoner war camps. But we were able to identify things like where the kitchens were, where the administration tents were. And about 10 years, or actually about 7 years after I started mapping the site, we had quite a fortuitous visitor from England. And his grandfather had actually been in this camp and had a photograph album which he brought along. And we managed in those days, it was quite primitive, to scan some of the photos, which I'm going to show you. So we won't just be seeing Anglo-Boer War remnants like 120 years later, on the ground as it is now, but we'll be seeing them as it was 110 to 120 years ago. So we'll move on. So looking from the ground again, I was talking about the tents and the tent lines. There you can see the 4 distinct tent lines. Over here were the kitchens and the mess tents, and over here, separate from the main camp, of course, were the officers' tents. And right down here was the parade ground. And just a word on how I managed to identify a lot of these features is that the head of the National Monuments Council at the time was approached in the early 1960s by an old man who had been a soldier in this camp. And so they visited the camp together, and he pointed out where the kitchens were, where the parade ground was, and everything. And so after I started working on the site, I took this old gentleman there, and he was able to remember all the features of the campsite. So it's been passed on, and I'm the kind of unofficial guardian of this beautiful campsite. And it's like going back in time more than 100 years. Everything's still perfectly there. The local people guarded jealously against illegal metal detectorists, people like that. So it's fairly well preserved. So moving on, this is in the tent lines now, but going back to 1900. So you can see the tents there and this ridge. And these are in fact Boer prisoners as per the label that were brought in. There they are being guarded and they're actually sitting down. And these are the administration tents that I pointed out earlier and that are on the map. So you can quite clearly stand in the tent lines today, look at this copy and imagine how it used to be. And in the album was quite a lot of interesting photographs, including this one. And it says building walls. And there you can see the troops building walls. And it's carefully laid out and in careful lines. And it obviously keeps the troops occupied because I don't think there was really much danger of this camp being attacked by the Boers, who at this stage generally didn't have artillery. So it wouldn't be a good advice to attack a 2-company strength fortified post such as this. On the right is a comparison. I, in fact, managed to identify exactly where these walls were built, and here is part of that wall that was built in 1900. So then we move on to the artillery camp, and this label says a 4.7-inch gun, which is in gun piquet number 1. And this, on the right-hand side, is gun piquet number 1. And you can see it's almost exactly as it was made. These big rocks here are still there. The front of the gun piquet, even the hills in the distance, are exactly the same. Now, it did start off with a big 5-inch gun, which came off the forts at Malta because they were brought out in emergency to match, or at least attempt to match, the far-ranging Boer long-term guns. And the range of this gun was 5,400 yards. That is on shrapnel. So the fuse went off, exploded above the Boers or above the target, and 200 metal balls descended at the speed of sound or light almost down in a cone shaped onto the poor unsuspecting Boers and their horses, and a lot of damage and death was caused. However, the barrels of these guns used to wear out, and this particular gun was replaced by a 4.7-inch naval gun, which you see pictured here. So the range on percussion, that is when the shell explodes beyond the range of the timer, so it hits the ground. The effect is not so great. The psychological effect is probably worse than the damage it causes, but that range was 10,500 yards, which is 9.6 kilometers, which is quite a fair distance. The long tom was about 14 kilometers on percussion. So this is what it looks like from the sky. And, you know, the service divisions in the British Army were, I mean, they lived apart, they supported each other, but each had their own little camps. So this was the artillery camp as opposed to the infantry camp that I showed you earlier. And this is gun PK number 1 that you saw from the ground there more than 110 years ago, and as it looks today. And here is some defensive walls. And I showed you these guys building these walls in 1900 and what they look like today. Pretty good job. And as you can imagine, me and my young family measuring these defensive walls that go all around the camp. I think it was, well over 9 kilometers of walling. And you can see every now and again there's a little fort that's been built into the wall in case it's attacked. So what started striking me was there was also lots of monoliths or upright stones, which seem to have been carved into shapes and engraved. And this particular one interested me quite a bit because it's been mounted actually on a platform. And there's some scratchings and there's some more engravings there. And so I started getting quite intrigued with this, and I started measuring heights. As you can see my little scale here. This one is about 2.5 meters, 2.3 meters high. That's very interesting. And I took a photograph with my son and my wife in it. I said, look, I need a scale here. So they kindly stood back there. And at this point in my life, I used to work in slides. And so after a couple of weeks, I got my slides back and had a look at them. Then I saw there was somebody in the background. And this was quite curious because the nearest person is 5 kilometers away. And we were most certainly on our own up there. And you will see there's somebody appears to be sitting on a rock over there. So that's quite unusual. So I thought, goodness, what could this be? So here you can see it enlarged in the background. And what it looks like is a man in a fur coat. You can see the fur collar and a fur hat. And he's just sitting on this rock and he's looking towards the east. And I thought, well, maybe it was an optical illusion. So when next I went back there, I took some friends with me and I said, look, just stand here. I just want to take a photograph. I want something maybe to come up in the background. And sure enough, I had my slides developed afterwards. And there this chap was sitting there. And he's become quite friendly with me in a way in that if I'm on my own, I can see him with my naked eye. When I first took my great friend Pedro there, we went up there and he said, so where's the ghost? So I said, no, it's a bit misty. You'll appear just now. And I was busy working and measuring on some rocks and Pedro was sitting here. And then the mist started clearing and I saw him sitting in the background. So I said to Pedro, no, there he is behind you. And Pedro jumped out of his skin, but he couldn't see anything. But I took the photograph and sure enough, a couple of weeks later when my slides were developed, there's Pedro and there sitting in the background is this guy. So of course I started getting very curious about it. And there's Pedro sitting there. That was that particular visit when I happened to get this gentleman in the background. And he's very benign. All he does is he sits and he looks to the east. And I eventually got up enough courage to go and approach him and go and sit on the rock, and he disappears. And I sit on the rock and I go back to this point, and there he's appeared again. So it's quite strange. And I've since worked out that he's guarding a secret. And the secret is connected with why this megalithic site was built. And you can see here that this stone has fallen. So there were 2 upright stones carved. This is a beautifully shaped stone. It's been pushed over one day when I get a team together, I'd like to lift it again so that you have these two parallel monoliths or upright stones together. This is quite a carving. I was just looking at my old field notebooks, and this engraving is long. It's actually 50 centimeters long, and its depth is 9 centimeters. So that's quite a carving, and especially in this rock. And the rock, by the way, is a subvolcanic rock in the Karoo Dolomites, and it's a diabase. Basically, it's a remnant of volcanic intrusions, which are quite shallow. It goes down about 2 kilometers under the present ground level. So it's also very interesting. And this particular formation with the quartzes give us amazing colored rocks. And I'm going to show you some more a little bit later. So now we go and we look at another photograph. This is with a more modern camera, but there you can see this upright stone on a platform, carved, and this. And that's quite curious. I started wondering, why would this happen? There's quite a lot of quite tall rocks, but there are only one or two that are shaped. And this is what the terrain looks like. And that's the rock there in the distance, the upright stone. And this is the view north from the stone. Beautiful view. Johannesburg is up towards that area, and beautiful farmland. So this particular rock, I then realized this is where it is in relation to the camp. Okay, and here, this SR, it's a huge sign that was made in 1900. Huge piles of rock that were whitewashed, Scottish rifles, to identify the campsite. And there's all these little pieces. Because Pedro and other people asked me, they said, why did you single out these particular rocks when you were measuring and looking at something else? Why did they stand out for you? Well, they stood out for me, and there's 3 of them. And I'll tell you right off now that they actually correspond exactly with the belt stars in the Orion constellation, just like the ones do at Giza up in Egypt. And a lot of work was done on that by Albert Duval, Graham Hancock. So we had the same phenomena here in South Africa. So this particular rock turned out to be the middle star in Orion's belt, which is known as Alnilam. And there it is on the map. And I'm going to take you now to the eastern part of the camp, where there was another one of these strange carved stones that took my attention. The distance between Alnilam and Nataka, which is the other belt star, which is the right-hand belt star as you look up in the sky, in the summer sky. So the distance between Alnilam here and Nataka there on the ground is exactly 1 kilometer. Now, I've correlated these distances with star maps, and they are absolutely exact in terms of angle and in terms of distance. So this is what the other one looks like, what Mintaka looks like. So Mintaka, if you extend the Orion belt line towards the east, and we're now looking from west to east, if you extend the line, in the distance in the sky is Taurus, and the bright star in Taurus is Aldebaran. So this is on that side of Aldebaran in Taurus. Beautifully carved stone. I mean, the effort in carving this is absolutely tremendous. And I'm going to show you what's on the back of the stone. It's quite interesting. It's this amazing groove, which is almost geometric in its engraving. And it's 30 millimeters deep, and it's almost the whole length of this upright stone. And the stone itself is 1.746 meters high. So that's 5.8 feet if you go back to the metric. The other interesting thing about this monolith is that from this point, looking back towards the other monolith that I showed you, Alnilam, you cannot see the one from the other. So how they got this precision of placing these stones in exact alignment with the stars in Orion's belt is anyone's guess. They must have had a technology that we just don't know. The next question is, what age? When was it done? Well, that we really don't know. But one of the interesting things about it, now this is looking from the north to the south, and you can see these great big carvings here. They really had to carve this out. And here, there's like a cupule engraving, which is 300 millimeters deep. And I don't know what the symbology of it is, but behind it there's a stone platform. And you can see the stone platform here, and there are a number of rocks with some very curious carvings on them, what we call petroglyphs. And this one in particular is very interesting because it's very carefully shaped and cut, and it's got a specific number of cup engravings or cupule engravings. And the number there is 7. And that's going to be very interesting with what I'm going to tell you a little bit further on. So this is the detail of this one. And I can assure you I've counted them and counted them in the field, and there are 7. And this is just beautifully shaped. And for what reason, one just doesn't know. The megalithic technology in the area is absolutely huge. So right from the early Stone Age through Middle and Late Stone Age. So also just lying here casually is a very early Stone Age hand axe. So that would be what could be 800,000 years old. And then the Stone Ages came down 200,000 years ago. There was the Middle Stone Age, which might well be that size hand axe. And then finally the Late Stone Age, where they were a lot smaller. And then this is a very, very interesting rock. And Martin Laveau, I think his name is Martineau, yes. Martineau, Levan Martineau, who did a lot of work on petroglyphs in America. He worked out that a lot of the petroglyphs were actually what he called directional indicators. So these zigzags, it almost looks like a Z, would indicate something. And it tells you that you must go along a specific path and you will find something. In this case, you will find something hidden, and that is what is hidden. So I actually worked it out on Google Earth, what this might be referring to, and it was very, very interesting. You follow a zigzag path up the hill here, and you come to a very, very interesting rock shelter. There's no engravings there, there's no paintings there, but it's very carefully marked. And the fact that it correlates with this rock is absolutely amazing. So now we move on. So now I'm going to show you the whole alignment. So we've just been busy with Mintaka, which is where the main part of the much, much, much thousands of years later campsite is. And in the middle is Alni Lam, where we started off, and we've just seen this one. Now the symbol for Mintaka is a 7, and I have 4 different correlations in different parts of South Africa, Orion belt correlations, and every one of them has an indicator for each star. And the indicator for Alni Tak is a 1, for Alni Lam is a 2, and for Mintaka is a 7. And later on I'll tell you why. So the total distance between Mintaka and Alni Tak is just short of 2 kilometers. And you can see the strange, slightly off angle. It's not a straight line. And if you look up in the sky, in summer of course, in the southern hemisphere, at the Orion constellation, you will see this angle is mirrored in the sky. And if you compare it with a sky chart, it's the exact correct angle. And if you correlate where these stars are, it's exact correlation almost to the meter of what is up there in the sky. As my friend and fellow researcher in Arizona, Gary David, says, as above, so below. And this is exactly what this one is. So let's go to the west of the site. And there is Alni Lam, where we started off, with where the spook lives, and where my friend was sitting with the 2 carved stones. And now we go west, and we go towards, if you look up in the sky, the extension of Orion's belt, quite far away, is the brightest star in the sky, Sirius. So this is now what I call the Sirius side of Orion's belt. You can see there's really nothing in between here. The British 120 years ago didn't see fit to build any defenses here. They built their last defenses here on this ridge, and to the north of them, there's extensive Iron Age villages, which are still in very, very good condition. And we're going to go now to this place. And I found this, again, quite by chance, because I decided I would get someone to drop me off round about here, and I would walk the length of this kopje or Mount Orion to see whether there were any Anglo-Boer War fortifications or tent sites or campsites in this portion. This was before Google Earth, so we had to walk, and we still walk because we still find a lot of things when we walk. And in a clump of trees here, I saw a most amazing stone. There you can see it here. This is really the absolute showpiece of this site. So there's another upright stone or monolith, and you'll see that the rocks have been built into a V shape in front of it. And I don't want to spend too much time on it, but there's a lot of little rock carvings on the western side, the northwestern side here, that correlate with this upright stone. So there's my long-suffering friend Pedro again, when I brought him on this visit, and he's looking at this rock. So you start getting an idea of the height of the rock. So this one is just short of 2 meters high, and it's absolutely beautiful. It is an amazing rock. So there you see it. It has been polished over millions and, well, not millions of years, but thousands and thousands of years. It's been absolutely polished smooth. And you can see the quartz being polished. And the interesting part about this upright stone is that it's got a couple of crystal eyes. And you can actually look into the eyes and see right into the middle of the rock. It's like being on another planet, in another dimension. And that also is there to show us something, and I'm going to show you that now. So there, it's not very well in focus, but you can see how beautiful this rock is, with all sorts of different pigments and just rubbed smooth. And this is one of the eyes. There's a couple of eyes. That is the main eye that you can actually look into. I've tried to take photos into this eye, but you can't. You can only look into it, and that's a close-up of the eye. You can see it's got micro scratches on it. It's totally transparent. And you would expect you wouldn't see anything in this rock. You would just see black, but there's actually a faint light. It's like looking into a deep cave. It's the most strange rock I've ever seen in my life. So there it is. It looks just like an eye. But I'm going to show you something else, because it struck me, and there were early photos taken by the Hubble spacecraft that actually showed the Orion Nebula, and it looked exactly like this. Now it's getting a little more sophisticated, as you can see, once the Hubble spacecraft had been repaired. But you can see the colors are the same. The shapes are the same. There's that eyeball type shape. So you can see there's the shape, there's the rock, the shape, and that is the Great Nebula in Orion. There's another photograph taken by the Hubble spacecraft. Absolutely magnificent. So also on the site, due to the geology, there are rocks which have the most beautiful colors, like this rock, for instance. There's also some other carved monoliths, which are really, really strange. I mean, one, I've forgotten about it when I was sorting out old slides for this presentation. I came across this. It doesn't correlate to any stars, but it's got a lot of carving in it. And look at this. This is absolutely amazing. It's like a dinosaur that's been carved. I mean, who on earth carved that? And you can see there's stress marks here, or line carvings, which absolutely amazing. I'm going to have to go back there. There's obviously some engravings here, which I hadn't noticed at the time. But this is absolutely amazing, amazingly significant. It's just, how do we put this lot together? And the site is full of these kind of anomalies.